A difficult but fair rhythm platformer with good music and a really weird story. Klang is a simplistic music-driven platform which caught my eye due to its relatively unique artwork. It has lots of characters with face masks which have sound waves pulsating across the front, but it also seemed to have a slightly different method of mixing the traditional rhythm formula with other elements. I'm not going to lie and say that I understood the story. You play as some guy with 2 weapons which look a bit like tuning forks, and you're being chased by 3 dudes which like EDM and lasers. Naturally, you need to deflect the music and throw them into a giant eyeball which seems to distort the world. Apparently he's trying to escape Soundlord Sonus. Who knew? So I'll get this out the way early on. I couldn't capture the footage through my usual recording software, meaning I had to try out something else, and as you can see the quality isn't quite the same. The game does have quite a clean look in reality. When you boot up the game, the initial loading time is quite substantial as it preloads all of the content. It does recommend that you put the game on an SSD to speed up the process a bit, but for a relatively simple platformer I'm surprised it's even necessary to preload anything. This does mean that the game flows well once you're in with minimal loading times, which to be fair is necessary given that the game is dependent upon the music. The only real breaks are at the end of each section when you get a score, but this is easily skipped so you can jump straight back into the action. It all seems like pretty normal rhythm gaming stuff initially as you move from room to room, hitting the notes in time with the music, and occasionally needing to move around a little as well. But this soon escalates as it throws more complex moves and more things to look out for at you. I tried to start out with a controller as I thought it would suit the type of game better, but quickly learnt that it was difficult to react on the joysticks fast enough to keep up with the music, as you need to return the stick to the centre to register the next move. So I figured I'd go back to keyboard controls, and it was a lot more responsive, particularly on the diagonal moves which require 2 key presses at the same time. I found it much easier to keep up with the game this way round. That isn't to say that the game then becomes easy, because some of the levels are incredibly cruel. I played through the entire campaign on normal, but once I was into the last few bonus levels, the difficulty ramped so much I have to admit I gave in and dropped the difficulty down again. Fortunately, you can do this in the middle of a campaign with little hassle. The gameplay has several elements to it. You have the basic beats which are controlled using the arrow keys, and you need to strike these once the beat is within hitting range of your character. There is a little indicator to show this. And you also have movement controls. Both jump and crouch are used later on in the game in line with the beats, but a lot of this is to do with positioning, which in many ways is more critical than hitting the notes themselves. This is because a lot of the lasers and various light sources deal the most damage. Some of them can even kill you on contact, so keeping away from them is critical, and if you miss a couple of notes to avoid them, it's no big deal. It all sounds relatively simple when you describe it, but the amount of multitasking involved to actually make it work is quite overwhelming at times. Admittedly, this is partly to do with the colour scheme of the game, as it can be quite difficult to see what you're trying to do with neon flashes constantly bombarding you. It's usually a domino effect. Once you've missed one, you tend to miss a couple, and getting that rhythm back can be hard work, sometimes leading you to just accept your fate, which is understandable as for the most part the checkpoints aren't too far away. It only becomes a slight problem on boss fights, as these traditionally have longer segments, and dropping back onto the checkpoint can be incredibly frustrating, but it is a boss after all, and it's supposed to provide a challenge. The music is all composed by Blind and is pretty solid throughout. There is some variety in the music, but it did start to sound a bit samey at the end. This might just be because I don't listen to a huge amount of EDM. Overall, it's not a bad little game. It combines several well-known mechanics together to provide an experience which is surprisingly different once you get stuck into it, and I found it to be challenging but rewarding in equal amounts. I will say that the campaign is pretty short at only about 2 hours, but it does have about another hour or so of bonus levels to rumble through, though a lot of the levels are very similar in terms of platform or layout, as well as some which are just plain copies. It's fairly disappointing that it couldn't have at least enough unique levels to fill it. It's one which I liked, but I feel that it's hard to recommend it as some people are going to hate it. It's targeted at quite a specific audience and isn't compelling enough to lure anyone else. It's one which I would wait for a sale on and pick it up if you're into some hardcore rhythm gaming. Some of the best moments are the movie sequences just because they're cool to watch, even if they don't make any sense.